In today's video, you're going to learn how to create a one-of-a-kind, custom-sampled sound bed patch that can add extra interest to your pads, synth sounds, and pianos. I'm going to teach you how to do this by using MainStage's Auto Sampler plugin to create custom sound sources that are truly one-of-a-kind. Once you've created these sound sources, you can use them in MainStage, Logic Pro, or even drop them into an instance of Sampler in Ableton Live. Let's check it out. Hey guys, David from Sunday Sounds here, where our focus is making it easier for you to achieve the worship sounds that you need in MainStage, Ableton Live, Omnisphere, and beyond. Make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell because we put out a new worship keys focused video every single week to help you take your worship sounds to the next level. Today I'm really excited about this topic because we're going to be diving into a new type of sound that a lot of folks don't talk about but is really important to adding diversity and interest to your sound design. I'm going to teach you how to create some custom sampled sound beds. Now if you're not familiar with that term sound beds, it's not just another term for a pad or an ambient sound. These types of sounds add motion, some interest, and extra character, oftentimes in a layered patch context. So let me give you a quick example up front of what this could mean. To start off with, I'm using our Sunday Keys template for MainStage, but we're going to be talking about the Auto Sampler plugin inside of MainStage today. And once you've got your samples created, you're going to be able to drop them into the DAW of your choice, Ableton Live, Logic Pro, and you can use them within MainStage as well. So first off, let me just give you an example of a regular pad sound. This is Warm Pad 1 from Sunday Keys. So it's a nice, straightforward, simple pad sound that doesn't really move around a lot. It has a gentle fade in and a gentle fade out, but while it's being held, it's just a nice, simple, sustained pad sound, which is really awesome, and oftentimes that's just what you need. It's perfect for layering with other instruments, and it can stand on its own as well and just sort of fill space. Now, I'm going to grab this sound bed sound that I've created called Distorted Dream Choir, and we're going to combine these using the Patch Builder workflow in Sunday Keys. And now let me give you a chance to hear what this sounds like. So here's just the pad, and I'll fade this back in. And then here's the sound bed on its own. And then once more, all together. So it's adding motion, some interest, a little bit of ebb and flow, some more dynamic changes to that pad patch in a really nice way. And then I'll grab a piano sound here and drop this in section 3 so you can really hear this in sort of maybe its full context. So I'm going to start by just balancing out the volume of these with the piano here. And let's hear how this sounds. So again, without the sound bed, it's a really sort of meat and potatoes piano and pad combination, which is really great. But adding in this sound bed layer gives it a little bit of extra tension, some sense of movement that's really nice. So I'm going to be teaching you how to create sounds like this today, and they're actually not that incredibly difficult to start to explore when you're using MainStage's Auto Sampler plugin. First, let me give you a couple more examples of this type of sound bed sound. This one's called Lingering Season, and it has some attack, a little bit of a tremolo feel. And this one actually moves around the stereo field a good bit as well. Here's another one that I really like called Piano on the Moon, kind of a fun name. Let me give you some context here, and I'll combine this one with that piano and pad again, so you can just hear how that sounds. And again, I can kind of dial this in to fill the right amount of space, so it's not too prominent or overpowering. And then lastly, here's sort of another tremolo sort of picking sound called trembling echo. This one's a little bit noisy. It has sort of a random feel to it, and it's just really, really a nice way to freshen up sort of a go-to pad sound. And you can just dial this in to exactly where it needs to be. Add some more reverb, get a little more ambient. So this is a really useful category of sound to have a few of in the sound library that you commonly pull from when you're building your worship patches, whether you're doing that in MainStage and Ableton or even on your hardware keyboard. Being able to add some motion, some ebb and flow to your piano and pad patches is a really nice effect that sometimes you want and other times you might need something a little bit simpler. But today I'm going to teach you the process of creating these sound beds using Auto Sampler in MainStage. So to start off with, let's just add a new patch. Now, I'm gonna be going kind of quickly through these steps, but you can always come back and rewatch this video to kind of keep up with each of the things that I'm doing, each of the actions that I'm taking. If you feel like you're really kind of confused on some of the terminology, a great place to start is to go to MainStage's Help menu and choose Use Auto Sampler with MainStage. MainStage's own help documentation does a great job of walking you through how the Auto Sampler plugin is designed to work. But to start off with, in this video, we're gonna do what's called resampling. We're gonna take some digital plugins, some instrument plugins here that already exist within MainStage. We're gonna combine some sounds together, and then we're gonna sample all of those unique sounds at the same time to create one new sound that has some custom samples of all of those instruments together. We're gonna keep this pretty simple, and you'll see what that looks like as we go. But let's start off by just adding a new channel strip to this patch. One instrument channel strip. And to start off with, let's just go to trusty retro synth. And we just want to build sort of a base for this sound. So something kind of mellow. And one thing that I like to do whenever I'm creating custom sampled instruments is to generally sample them with attack, because once you've grabbed the samples, you can always back the attack off within the sampler that you're using. If you don't sample with attack, then you can never artificially really add that attack in, but you can always take it out really easily afterwards. So even though the end sound might not end up having attack, we're gonna sample with attack for now. Let's do something really simple. I'm gonna add a little bit of chorus. Okay. And then we're gonna let this LFO just modulate shape a little bit. A little bit of motion. Now, one really great thing about creating sampled instruments using custom sound sources that you're dialing in is you can sample them really, really wet with lots of reverb, lots of time-based effects, but then you have total control over how long these sounds take to decay after you've sampled them. So we're gonna add a bunch of reverb. Let's go there and add a good bit of modulation as well. There we go. Okay. Cool. All right, now let's go ahead and just duplicate this channel strip. I just select it and hit Command D on my keyboard and that duplicates it. Now let's add another instrument. One thing that I'm really loving using for creating these sorts of sound beds is actually this sculpture plugin inside of MainStage. I'm gonna solo this channel strip so we're not hearing the other one. Sculpture is a modeling synth that models a physical string that you can see being vibrated as I play. And you can attack it or cross the string or strike the string with different types of modeled responses. So we could do a pick. We could do a bow. A strike. All sorts of different things. And you can also sort of affect the string, the model string, in different ways at the same time. Sculpture is really intimidating to a lot of people because it can sound really funky really fast as you make changes. But there's also some really, really amazing things that you can do with it. So if you want to learn more about that plugin, I recommend just checking out the factory presets that are a part of the Sculpture plugin. And you can also learn more about it inside MainStage's help guide. Again, you just go up to help and then choose MainStage instruments, and there's a whole section of the help guide that's devoted to the Sculpture plugin. Okay, so I turned on the filter here to sort of tame the sound. So I've got sort of a nice ambience going there. I really like that. So then I've got sort of these two sounds together. Now, we could just sample these two instruments and it would come across as one layered patch, but there's something a little bit more interesting that I'd like to do as I'm working on this sound bed. So what I'm going to do is limit the layer range of this first patch to just middle C right here. And then I'm going to set the low note of this other one to right there. So now up here in the right hand, I've got just my instance of Sculpture. I'm going to add an instance of channel EQ and cut some of the mud. So we really just want that high sort of frequency stuff. And then here, I'm going to add an instance of stereo spread. Bring the lower interval down to 0. And I'm just kind of widening that sound a little bit. And I'm also going to add an instance of channel EQ here. It's a great idea to do some EQ before you sample, because once it's present in the samples, it can be a little bit more difficult to sort things out the way that you'd like. You don't want to be too subtractive with your EQ here though, because you're going to end up pitch shifting the notes that you capture across multiple keys, sometimes, like we're going to do in this example, across a wide stretch of the keyboard. So what sounds great for one note or for a small range of notes might not actually translate for others. So just a little bit of EQ that's pretty general. So I'm just kind of cutting some of the mud here. Notice I'm not being like razor focused on this one note. I'm sort of capturing that whole frequency range. Okay. So you might not quite get why I'm doing it in this way yet, but it's about to make a little bit more sense. So we've got this one instrument here. This is a pretty basic sound, and then I'm able to layer this on top. So now let's get into adding an instance of auto sampler. I'm going to scroll all the way over here to my output channel strip. And you can see that I've actually already got an instance of auto sampler on here. I'm going to go ahead and take that off, and I'll just add one so you know where to get to it. Click on any audio effect area and choose Auto Sampler. Now here we are inside the Auto Sampler plugin. And your default may look a little bit different than mine because I've set a custom default starting position for the plugin. What we need is to set the range start and the range end to be this middle C note, because we're just going to grab one note here. We're not going to get into all the settings here within this plugin because you can read MainStage's help guide if you want to know exactly what you're looking at here, but the default settings are actually pretty passable. Mainly just want to make sure when you're starting out that you set the right start and end point for what you're trying to accomplish, and then you can adjust how long the sample is going to be. We're going to bring this up to about 10 seconds. Since we're only capturing one sample, we can give it a little bit more time to evolve without the patch getting super huge and chewing up lots of memory. Okay, so now I'm just going to hit sample, and right after I do, Auto Sampler is going to play that C4, and it's going to start to capture a 10-second log sample of that note. But what you need to know is that anything else you play on the keyboard is going to be present in that captured sample. So while that note is playing, I'm going to manually add in a little bit of this texture. All right, let's give it a go. So we're going to hit sample. Then we've got to give it a name. So let's say video soundbed. And then auto sampler is going to let the tail fade out naturally. If I were to keep playing, it would actually keep sampling indefinitely until it detected the end of the audio file. So make sure you don't continue to play once you hear the sample start to fade. All right, and that's all there is to it. So now let's check out the custom instrument that we created. I'm going to add a new patch with a new channel strip. And we're going to load in EXS24. Then I'm going to click on the green preset area here and navigate to the auto-sampled folder that's in the dropdown. Now we're going to scroll down and find our video sound bed. All right, so right off the bat, there's nothing playing on the keyboard except that one note. So to make this playable across the whole range, we need to click on Edit. And here we can view the Edit window where we can make changes to the EXS24 instrument. So you'll notice here is this little blue bar over just that one note that represents the custom sample. I'm going to click and drag on both ends of the sample to span it across the entire keyboard. Now, keep in mind that depending on the sample that you grab, this may or may not sound good. Another thing that we're going to do while we're here is make sure that the sample is set to loop. Now, depending on whether or not you've used the EXS24 editor before, you may or may not see all of these options here. I like to just click View and choose All. Scroll over to the right until you see the loop area. Now, depending on the settings that you plugged into the auto sampler plugin before you captured your sample, you may or may not see a start and an end time, and you may or may not see a crossfade time. For these sorts of ambient sounds, I like to set crossfade generally to the max value, which is 9,999. And then you can play around with the start and end points to find what makes the most sense to you and what actually sounds good. And of course, you can try this out while the instrument is in edit mode. All right, so then I'm going to click Instrument and choose Save. I'm going to close the editor. So now we've got our instrument. And it's a fairly straightforward sound on the surface, but then there's this little bit of ambience, this little bit of motion happening on top. So it's not just a vanilla pad, it's got some extra movement going on. Now I'm going to turn on the filter and bring down the cutoff. And bring up the resonance. And you may remember a minute ago I talked about being artificially able to elongate the attack. I'm going to do that now here in envelope 2. So there's just a subtle motion to this sound. If we wanted it to be more dramatic, we could go back in and we could change up the volume of the two instruments. We could increase the volume of the sculpture and decrease the volume of the pad. Or if we wanted to, we could add a completely new sound. Let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to add another software instrument. Now, let's go into something like ES2. And here we are going to increase the attack time of the instrument. Let's make it a pretty slow sweep in. I'm going to bring down the filter cutoff so that this is a really subtle sound. We're going to go to unison and bring in the second oscillator. There we go. And we'll add in some FM and maybe a little bit of flanger. Again, the point here is to add some motion to the sound. And then why don't we target pitch of the first oscillator? We'll do that via LFO1. We'll delay that a little bit so it comes in after about a second. You see that's a really dramatic effect. But we can make it subtle to add a little bit of motion. And then we'll make it slower as well. And then why don't we go one step further and add an instance of tremolo. Do a nice slow trem. And this is just going to add some left-right motion in panning across the stereo field to this sound. There we go. So now we have a little bit more motion going on than we did before. The last thing I'm going to do is decrease the amount that the envelope filter impacts the brightness of the sound. So I noticed that it was a little bit brighter than I maybe wanted it to be. All right, so let's just resample this now. We can either replace the one that we did before, or if we'd like, we can save it as version 2. Again, I'm manually playing these notes in the right hand. And because I left that instance of ES2 open, it's also capturing on top when I play those notes. Okay, now let's go back to this EXS24 patch that we created. And so we can easily compare these two different patches, or different sounds that we've created. I'm going to just duplicate the channel strip and solo the second one. Now I'm going to click here, go back to the auto-sampled folder, and choose Video Soundbed 2. Now I'm going to click into Edit again, and stretch this sample across the whole key range. And then I'm also going to set the crossfade amount in the loop section to the max. And just looking at this one, it looks like the loop range is pretty small. And when you're working with a really, really long sample, like we can see, we start here at 213, and we go all the way up to 941. But the loop here was auto-detected to only be about 50,000. So I'm actually going to set the start of the loop to be earlier, and set the end of the loop to be later. This way, more of the motion that I captured in the original sample is going to come through in the sampled instrument. Then I'm going to click Instrument and choose Save. And now we can check this out. So a lot more motion right off the bat here, which is really cool. This one is a little bit quieter, so we could go in and we could resample it to be louder. But for now, I'm just going to use an instance of the gain plugin to bring up the volume. There we go. And then again, we can use ADSR here in envelope 2 in the plugin to give it a little bit less attack. We can bring in the filter if we want to filter it down. And as we do that, it's getting a little bit muddy to my ears, so of course we can use EQ to clean that up. Now that we've got the whole instrument created, we can add additional effects as we'd like, or we could take this into another software like Logic Pro or Ableton Live. We could drop the raw sample from the folder that is created by AutoSampler into the Sampler or Simpler plugin inside of Ableton and use it there. But for now, I'm just going to keep working inside of MainStage. We're going to add an instance of Silververb to just sort of wash out the whole patch. And then I'm also going to add a compressor to sort of balance out those peaks. Just help smooth things out a little bit there, which is kind of nice. like this is a really, really nice way to add some texture. So I'm gonna name it now. Okay, so now we have this sound bed named, and let me go ahead and give you a little bit more context. We're gonna combine it back in with that pad and piano sound from the beginning of the video. So obviously we have the pad and piano mapped in Sunday keys, but here's this sound bed that we created in EXS24 as well. So let me give you a listen to how that sounds. So we can map this to Sunday keys if we wanted, or we could just use the channel strip volume to bring it down, dial it into where we want. Here's just the sound bed again. Like I said a little while ago, stretching that sample across the whole key range, sometimes that'll work really well, other times it'll get a little bit too glitchy or artifacty, sped up or slowed down too much as it's pitch shifted. So if we go to really high notes here, it can get pretty noisy and pretty brittle. So it's a good idea to evaluate how far the layer range really should stretch. That low note is a little bit too slow, so we're going to bring that up to about there. So now we have just right in the mid-range this really nice sound, just adding some completely unique, one-of-a-kind motion to our patches. So that's a really quick sort of top-down view on how you can use Auto Sampler and MainStage, resample some sounds, and create completely one-of-a-kind sound beds that you can then drop into whatever software you'd like. Once these samples are created, you can load them into Omnisphere, you can load them into Ableton Live, you can use them in MainStage or Logic Pro as EXS24 instruments. Once you start learning how to do this, the sky is the limit in terms of expressing your creativity and discovering new sounds. So leave a comment and let us know if this is a type of sound that's exciting to you. And if you want some of these types of soundbed sounds done for you, then check out the link in the description, because Soundbeds Volume 1, which includes the demo patches that I've showed you at the beginning of this video, is now available for both MainStage and Ableton Live. It comes with 20 ready-to-go soundbeds that you can drop into your Sunday keys workflow and have been specifically designed to add that sort of motion, interest, and ebb and flow to your sound design. Thanks for checking out this video, and have a great day.